today's video we'll be taking you through a set that I'm making of 1 card and 2 tags. I'm using this paper that I got in a paper pack ages ago, and I really love the design of the paper, but I found it was a little bit bright and so I struggled to use it. So the way that I'm going to overcome that today is to give it a light coat of gesso. So I'm just toning down the colours on the paper, and the design I've used before works really well in a beachy themed kind of design because of those beautiful blue and yellow lines. The purple doesn't match that theme quite as well, so I am actually trying to deliberately paint over the purple, and hopefully that will reduce the dominance of that colour on the page. The beauty of gesso is that it does dry quite quickly, so by the time I go ahead and prepare everything else, it should be dry and ready to use. So I'm just going ahead and cleaning my craft mat, and then I'll go ahead and start preparing my card and tag bases. So I've already cut those out. I've got a white card base there, and then I've got a mat for that, and also the 2 tags. So those are in brown sugar is the colour from Kazaz, which is an Australian paper crafting company. And I'm just going to go ahead and ink the edges of each of those with the vintage photo distress ink, just to soften the edges. Because it's a beachy theme, I'm just trying to sort of blend things out and make them look quite soft. So I go ahead and ink the edges of all of those, and this is a great technique for that paper if you have something that's quite bold, you really like the pattern for, but you're struggling to use it because it is quite a bold pattern or bright pattern, and it works really well. So I've just got myself a few stamps. These are all Kazaz stamps as well, and they're all different shells. So this one is a shell border, and so there's multiple shells which create a little bit of an edge there. And so I'm going to go ahead and stamp a couple of those using watering can archival ink. The reason I'm using a grey is because I'm going to watercolour the images, and so what I really want is just to have the lines there but quite faint, so looking for a lighter colour. I still do want the lines, so I'm doing it in that grey rather than like a really light brown or something, but I just don't want it to be so harsh because everything else on these cards will be quite soft. So just stamping a few different shells there. I haven't decided what the design is going to be, so I figure if I stamp and colour a few shells, once I start to pull the cards together, I can trim them out and decide whether they will work well on each of the designs that I'm going with. So I've just got myself an inexpensive set of watercolour pencils. I love using watercolour pencils because I'm not a patient person when it comes to colouring in, and so I tend to want to get the colouring in done quickly, and I definitely envy people who can sit there and be quite detailed in their colouring in. I do have some alcohol markers, and I've really struggled to use them because it does take a while to get the colours and the techniques right. So I've chosen the colours today based on the colours that are in the paper. So I'm looking for a blue, a purple and a yellow, and you can see that I just tested those colours on the white cardstock just to make sure they were the right tones that I was looking for before I went ahead and started colouring the images. So I'm starting with the darkest colour and just going ahead and colouring all the images with that darkest colour, and then I'll go back over with the lighter colours and add a little bit more until I get to the lightest colour. Now you can use this technique with many colours. I think 3 is probably a good number, particularly if you're new to colouring images, but definitely if you wanted to add more colour to them you could, or if you just wanted to stick with 2 colours to keep it quite simple, you could also do that. But really I just like the idea of being able to colour the images in to match those papers, and because we've toned down the brightness of it, if you try to do this with something like alcohol markers, it would just be way too bright. So really going for that really soft look with these particular cards. So just going ahead and adding all of the colour, and I'll skip through this bit shortly and go straight to the water part of the colouring in. And I just find that watercolours is a really simple way to colour images and not be too particular about staying in the lines, and it doesn't take too long when you are using watercolours, which I love. So quick techniques are good techniques as far as I'm concerned. So almost, I think I'll skip ahead here shortly. This bit goes on for longer than I expected. I should have cut it out a little bit earlier. And so there we go. So now I've finished colouring in everything, I'm going to go ahead with my water and just soften those colours out. And as a general rule, I start from the lightest colour with the waters and go to the darkest colour. I think just if you don't, you find that you're drawing too much of that dark colour into the lighter colours and it starts to dominate. You can, do a few strokes in the opposite direction if you're looking for a bit more of that dark colour. But I find that, it's often just as a general rule, that's the best way to go. So just going ahead, and you can see how quick it is to then brush over those colours. You don't have to be too particular, and I think that when you're going for that really organic, soft look, the quicker you do it, the better it is. If you overthink it too much, you find, or I find, that it does look too structured. And so really it is about making it quick. And because I'm going to cut these images out, it doesn't really matter too much if I go outside of the lines, because I will be trimming off the edges. So definitely a great technique if you're messy like me when it comes to those finer details. So now I'm going to go ahead and start thinking about assembling the cards, or card and tags. So first of all, I'm going to work on the card just because I think, it's got the extra layer to it, so I'll get that one done first. And with this pattern paper, I really like the idea of keeping those lines on horizontal, simply because, it kind of goes with that beach theme of, the water, layers of water, sky, sun, sand, that kind of thing. So I've measured the card base, or the mat for the card base, and I'm going to go ahead and trim a piece of paper that will fit inside that with a small border. I think I did 1/2 centimetre border. It might even be 1/4 centimetre border. So then I'll go ahead and ink the edges of all of that, again just to soften it. And I ink everything. If I'm going to ink one thing, I generally ink the edges of everything that I'm using. And so you can see the beginning was really getting all of the supplies ready, so the embellishment, the shell embellishments, the background paper, the bases, and now I'll sort of work on an individual card a little bit more, focus on getting that pulled together, and then I'll come back and adhere it all down and finish it off. So that's generally how I'll make a set of cards if I'm going to make a set, is to work, getting the supplies ready, and then I'll put one together at a time, as opposed to, this part doing it, each card step by step. So now I have this beautiful, I don't even know what it's called, but basically it came from the ribbon section of my local craft store, and it's this beautiful netting almost, so it looks a little bit like spider web, or I find though that it's a beautiful ribbon, you could call it, I guess, for beachy themed things, because it does really, have that corally appearance, and it allows the colours to come through the background. And so very pretty and very delicate, and adds a lovely texture to things. So I've gone ahead and trimmed that, so I'm going to adhere that across the card, and then I'm doing some shadow stamping, so basically where you stamp off some of the ink and then stamp the remaining ink onto the background or whatever you're doing. So that was with that net stamp, and so just cutting out the shell that I think will go on this particular card, and I just trim it down a little bit just to see if I'm happy with it, if I think that's going to look good there, and then I will play around with the placement a little bit, and if I am happy with it, then I'll push that to the side and move on to the next tag. So the technique that I'm going to use for this, I'm going to adhere the base to the card first, and the technique I'm going to use to get the paper ready for the tag will be slightly different. I don't like to measure if I can avoid it, so you'll see, actually I'm not sure if you'll see, I think I do this off camera, but when I make the second tag you'll see it. So basically I use the tag as a guide. What I do is I line it up to see where I'd like, how much of a border I'd like, so I'm looking at that now, and then I double it, and then I will use the line, the edge of the tag, to trim it down. So basically when I move it back into the middle, I've got the border that I'm after. And I'm sorry for doing this off camera, I didn't realise I was doing it off camera, but when I make the second tag you'll definitely see the technique all the way through. But yeah, basically using the base tag as a guide to how I want to trim the paper. And so the same thing again, I'm going to ink the edges of this paper, and then I'm going to assemble it without actually adhering it all down, and then I'll move on to the third tag before I put it all together. So I'm using this ribbon again, and what I actually do with the ribbon, I did this on the first card as well, was to roughen the edges a little bit. So because it's a straight cut that I use to trim the edge, I don't want it to be straight, so you'll see me work on that in a moment. And the other thing I wanted to mention was with the tag, I'm actually putting 2 pieces of double-sided tape at the top of the tag, and putting one right as close to the top as possible, and it overhangs, so I end up trimming a little bit of it off. But the idea is that I will be punching a hole at the top of that tag, and so I want the double-sided tape to go both above and below the hole. So I put one piece right at the top and one piece about 1 centimetre below. So just adhering that down. And then you'll see the technique that I was talking about with this ribbon. So I just go ahead with my scissors and on a bit of an angle in opposite directions I trim the edges so that it just looks a little bit rough rather than a straight line. It kind of plays into the design of the ribbon a little bit more. So then thinking about which shell I'm going to use, and the reason I stamp multiple shells and then colour it slightly differently is I'd like to see the end result, and then I have some options to choose from. So if I end up using the background paper that has a lot of blue, I'd like the shell to have a bit more blue. If I ended up using a bit of background paper that was more sort of whites and yellows and not a lot of blue, then I might have chosen the other shell to put onto that tag. So this is that technique I was talking about. I'm just deciding that's the border I want, and then I go ahead and double that, and that's where I double it there, and then I'll trim the edges so that I've got double the border on one side, and then when I move it back to the middle I've got the exact border that I want. So just moved it over to the other side so I can trim that top diagonal piece, and then I've got myself a piece of paper that fits perfectly, and that way I hand cut those tags to start with. So if for some reason I haven't quite cut those corners perfectly, the paper will still fit within that tag and give a nice edge all the way around, whereas if you measure it all out and you get one measurement wrong, then everything looks wrong. And this is that technique I was saying about just trimming into the ribbon to rough the edges up a little bit more, and then just going to adhere all of that down. That's my little 4-month-old contributing to the voiceover there. So I'm just going ahead and adhering all of that down as well. And so the same technique that I used with the cards, I'll use with the tag. So I'm going to go ahead and do some shadow stamping with that net. And I do skip over a bit of this towards the end because it's just sort of stamping and assembling and inking the edge. Don't forget to ink the edge. It would have bugged me if I'd noticed it later if I hadn't inked the edge on that one piece. So just going ahead and adhering that down now, and same kind of technique again. The only difference with the two tags is I decide to orientate one on a horizontal and one on a vertical. So yeah, they're enough of a difference to me to make them unique, but you can see obviously the same concept has gone into creating all of them. So then I'll go ahead and fussy cut out all of the edging and stamp the sentiments as well. So I go ahead and do that off camera, but I'm just stamp happy birthday, and then I'm also going to glue down the those ribbons. So one of the things about that ribbon is it's really hard to adhere. So what you need to do is use some tacky kind of glue and adhere underneath the embellishments. So I do ink the embellishments as well, as you can see me doing there, and I do curl the embellishments a little bit to give dimension, because I'm going to use tacky glue to adhere them as opposed to dimensional adhesive. Just by using the bone folder to curl them a little bit will help them lift off the page just that little bit. So just going ahead and doing that. So I'll add some still shots at the end so you can have a bit of a closer look, but if you like the video, please do give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more of my videos, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Please leave a comment below if you've done this kind of altered stuff to papers before. I'd love to hear or see your projects, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching.